Welcome to another episode of West Meets East. While we're on the topic of money, I want to rectify a misconception that has sort of haunted me ever since we appeared on Real Life 4 years ago in Vietnam. In that series, they focus on gay couples and gay relationships, mostly in Vietnam, of course. We appeared on it during COVID. So we were in the United States and they switched to an online platform. So that's why we were able to do it remotely from our apartment in Maine. But I convinced my husband, who is very shy, that's why he's still not appeared on this channel, to do it because we used to watch that show together. And all the couples were either, in the process of breaking up, have already broken up, were struggling, were unhappy. And to me, it was projecting an image of gay relationships not being successful in Vietnam. So I really wanted to provide an example, to the viewers of that show that, yes, you can have a successful, healthy gay relationship. So, I convinced Hui to do it, and we appeared on that show in September of 2021. As I mentioned in earlier episodes, what took me by surprise, in addition to the comments, were the amount of times that the show was picked up by other, dare I say, news agencies or online platforms in Vietnam. Probably 7 or 8 other online platforms just basically took the story from real life and condensed the events down into what appeared to be a sort of news-like article. But they only focused on one thing, and that was the money that I supposedly had sent over to give to my husband. And that couldn't be further from the truth. The reason why I moved to Vietnam in the first place was I had left education because I had worked in education for 23, 24 years and I wanted something different. And I am not rich. I was never rich. I worked in education. And, even my highest salary as a school principal was still upper middle class by US standards. But because I lost my husband in 2012, and because I sold our house, which did not have a very large mortgage, I was momentarily flush with some money. And by, Southeast Asian standards, yeah, I was probably extremely rich. But to me, as an American, I was just temporarily flush with some cash. So I moved to Vietnam, and my goal was to try to open up a gay bed and breakfast. I like hospitalities. I wanted something that I didn't see a lot of in Vietnam. There are not a lot of gay guest houses in Vietnam, and there's reasons for that. So I was going to bring over $400,000. Again, this is not money that I earned. It was from life insurance and it was from the sale of my house. So in the story, and I went back and watched it, and I can understand why it seemed like I was sending it to Hui, because I think I said it that way. But what I meant to say was that I was sending it to myself. Because when I moved to Hoi An to be with Hui, I literally had only met him twice in person. Once when we met originally on Phu Quoc in Vietnam, and then he came and stayed with me in Saigon for one night before I went back to Seoul. The rest of the time we were only chatting online. So 6 months later, when I moved to Hoi An, we started, living together, which many of my friends and family thought was nuts that I barely met this man. But when we decided to start looking for property, and I decided to send the money over from the US, we met with a lawyer first, and we wrote up an agreement and signed it. And it was translated in both Vietnamese and English. And in the agreement, it said that any money that I contribute to any venture must go back to me first. And any money we make after that venture that we have done together would be split 50-50. So I was not giving $400,000 to an almost perfect stranger. What I did was I had to work with my bank at the time, which was Wells Fargo, and have it transferred over to a bank in Vietnam. And it was my bank account that I was able to open on my own. My husband of today, just my boyfriend at the time, did not have access to my bank account. So, I mean, I think people in Vietnam thought I had just stepped off the truck and they could sell me a bridge in Brooklyn. You know, I'm not that dumb or naive. You know, this was something that I was planning to do all along. And, you know, it sent this wrong message and was almost the polar opposite of what I was trying to achieve by being on Real Life. You know, I didn't want to promote the stereotype that Asian people should look for rich white Americans to make their life easier. You know, I moved over to Vietnam. I was planning to move over before I even met Huy. When I met Huy, that was like the cherry on the cake, because, you know, he was somebody that I thought that I could potentially date. And so that was not the perception I was trying to send when I agreed to be on that show. And so if anybody's ever seen some of these news articles, which, you know, are still out there, and the show is still out there, you know, please note that was a real misunderstanding. And it was very hard to sort of explain to people in the comments. In fact, I just kind of gave up because, you know, I would get into arguments about how rich I am. And, you know, I'm not rich. And the bed and breakfast never did happen, just because if I were rich, I would have had enough money to be able to afford to build it. But after purchasing the land and having the plans developed, we didn't have enough money to build it without taking out a loan. And if you're ever thinking about investing in Southeast Asia, don't borrow money. You know, only invest if you have enough money to do it without borrowing money, because borrowing money is a sure path to bankruptcy. So, you know, we switched plans based after that. And, you know, if you're curious to know what I did, where I ended up earning a lot of money for both of us, I'm happy to tell you privately. But anyway, this platform has given me an opportunity to clear up that misconception that has haunted me for 4 years. So thanks, everybody. And I have maybe one or two more topics about money, and then I'm going to move on to our next topic. So as always, I appreciate the audience. I hope that you like and subscribe and share, and help me to grow my channel and my online platform. Thank you all.